So
So
you were in the States for 3 weeks while
my
he was still down there?
yeah, and
Yeah.
my parents live on the island. His parents live on the island. My brother lives on the island. A lot of friends were here, and so we lived through the whole trying to communicate and figure out how to survive,
Right.
together. It was easier for people to communicate with people in the States than it was with each other on the island. So
Right.
I would, record weather videos and send information from the news and things that were going on that they never even knew was happening.
Yeah. Believe it or not, one of the best pieces of news I got was one day she sends me a text and says, uh, because I couldn't get any local weather, there was
Hmm.
no satellites, nothing, and she says, no storms for the next 5 days. And I was like, great, that's the best I've heard yet.
So this was a big process for you guys. I know we're covering a lot. Now tell us just a little bit about your story. How did you guys get down to Puerto Rico? What brought you down there?
Well, I grew up in Puerto Rico. My father and my parents came to Puerto Rico back in the early '60s. They were, what you would say,
Pioneers.
pioneers at the time. Following where the business was, because my dad was in construction; he was an engineer, and when I got to Puerto Rico, I was 3 or 4 years old and grew up here. I studied in the States, came back. Carmen and I actually met in high school here in Puerto Rico.
Really?
Yeah.
And
But then we were separated for a
but
long
yeah,
time.
we were just
A couple of
friends.
lifetimes later.
A couple of lifetimes later, we
And-
met up again
Yeah.
for a nice hurricane season.
Right.
We've been together for about 5 years, a little over 5 years now, and we bought a house together, and right 50 feet from the beach, and renovated it to run an Airbnb. And in the meantime, he was the contractor, so he did all the renovation, and then we started a contracting business too, and for remodeling. So both of those have been affected by this storm. Airbnb
Dramatically.
in a bad way, contracting in a good way.
Right.
Yeah, well, I guess any silver lining that you can take from this is good news. I guess with the contracting business, my father's also a contractor, and we lived in South Florida, so I know that side of it all too well. Now, you said that you were in the States during Maria, but you, sir, were down in Puerto Rico. What brought you to the States before the storm happened?
Who, me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh, I was visiting my daughter
Okay.
in Minnesota and helping her with a house that they were getting ready to sell, and we were going to go. Hunter and I were going to go on this road trip to visit relatives in Canada and friends in Montana. We had this big thing planned, and the hurricanes totally put the kibosh on that, and then I got stuck there. I just couldn't get out. At first I had to change his ticket. I had to fight with the airlines to change his ticket and get a full credit for that. And they were very willing after a few phone calls. And then I kept buying a ticket, and then 2 days later they would say, no, this flight has been canceled. And I understood that the tower had been very damaged in Puerto Rico. Airlines were not flying in at all. And then when they started flying in, it was mainly cargo and first responders. And the airport was filled with like 1,000 people had come to the airport and were using it as a refuge, even though there was no water and no electricity, and it was pretty damaged. I mean, it was utter chaos on the island in the first few weeks, and it was really, really hot. I mean, poor Hunter. He was when we could talk. So communications were completely wiped out, and when we could speak, he would have to find a little pocket, like on a strange little corner of a street, he would find signal. Everybody was always walking around and driving around with their phones in front of their faces to see if they would get a signal. And as soon as they got signal, they would pull over, and then other people would start pulling over because everybody knew that that's where you would get a signal.
Right.
And if you moved a foot away from that spot, your call would be completely dropped.
So what was going through? Go ahead.
A signal on the highway was you'd be driving down the highway, you see 4 or 5 cars on the marginal. Pull over right there. That's the place to make a phone call.
That's the place. So very localized areas, I guess we could say, sporadic across the island.
So people would have to drive miles to a bridge, or miles if the roads were open. They would have to drive miles to the highway to make a phone call, and families were completely cut off from each other, from the states and within the island.
And it's still that way.
It seems like it would be. I mean, I've heard about the communication towers and everything ongoing down there. It seems like it's still an ongoing issue.
Right. Oh, and I think we still don't have Doppler radar.
I think there's some mobile sites that are set up right there, but the actual radar site at the National Weather Service in San Juan, obviously completely destroyed. What was going through your heads as you were in the States and your husband was down in Puerto Rico? You guys didn't have communication. What were you thinking during that time?
There's, her being in the States was worse than for me, because here I had so many things I had to get done. And, you're walking around and there's no signal. You just, it's like, okay, it's a given. I really feel bad for her because I know she's got to be worried to death, but there's no signal. Let me get this.
Go ahead.
There's no signal. And we had a group text going on with some other friends who were on the island, and everybody was trying to help each other. So during the storm, Hunter spent the storm at my parents' house. My parents were at their house in the country. So he was there, and it was in part of the neighborhood of Ocean Park, which is a little bit difficult to describe. But we didn't want him to stay at our house because we're only 50 feet from the beach. So there was this huge prediction of a storm surge coming in. We really didn't know what was going to happen. And so we felt that staying at our house wasn't a good idea. He had spent days preparing the house for the storm, putting up storm shutters, putting up plywood, all of that stuff. He went to my parents, and they have a huge storm shutter garage door. So during the middle of the storm, that blew out. He was unable to bring it down. All the trees were blowing down. It was just incredible. And we were having trouble communicating with each other. But he did take videos of everything. So later on, when he was able to get in touch with me, he could show me what was going on. And right after the storm, he found a little cell pocket a few blocks away where he could call me and talk to me and let me know what was going on.
Wow.
My parents were stuck out in the country, and my brother and some friends went out there a couple of days later, and a half-hour drive took 2 hours to get out. And then on the driveway, it took 4 men 4.5 hours to clear the driveway.
Wow.
Out there, because every single tree on the property came down.
All the bamboo,
the huge giant grove of bamboo came down. Giant mango trees that were probably 50 years old. I mean, every single tree came down. And the same thing happened with Hunter's parents. Get more in the screen. The same thing happened with Hunter's parents, who live out behind El Yunque. Every single tree came down. Like 8 beautiful, huge avocado trees, all gone. Every leaf stripped. He sent me pictures of the trees. It was like a winter landscape down here. The sand, and the wind was just tremendous.
I remember seeing video and photos of El Yunque National Forest there, and just remembering how bare it looked. Did you guys think by any imagination of yourself that this storm was going to be as bad as it was?
No.
And he lived through Hugo.
I've been through a few of them, and I've been through Irma, through Hugo, through George, And there was nothing like this. This was just, there's no way to describe it, you know. I mean, you know, you didn't even know it was raining because it was going so fast
And loud.
and so loud. I mean, you know, the only reason I knew it was raining is because I could see the water level going up throughout the streets. Because, of course, everything gets clogged with leaves within hours.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes on for 10 hours, 8 hours.
I remember texting my mom at around 4:30 in the morning, her time, 4:30.
Might have a little connection issue right there. May have to start that over. So we'll get that in just a second. But I mean, what they're saying is obviously that we've had a tremendous amount of unexpectancy with the storm. I mean, they both were saying, you both were saying that you've lived through a couple of different systems here that are storms that have came through Puerto Rico. They're both longtime residents, and this one was definitely one of the more powerful ones. We'll try to get that back up in just a second. But also, they were both separated in this time. They were, the wife there was back in the States and the husband was down in Puerto Rico. The wife was helping somebody in the States and they got separated. The storm came through. There was no airline to bring them back in, obviously. And the airlines that did start to trickle back in, they were being very particular about what kind of supplies or how much cargo they could bring or how much cargo they could bring out. So the fact that it took a lot of time to get back to the island to reconnect these two was just a huge feat for this couple to go through. And obviously the connection issues are still ongoing down in Puerto Rico. That's where we're finding Carmen and also her husband here. So Hunter, that's why we're talking to them. We want to hear their story and we're going to get them connected again very soon. I want to talk to them about what they experienced as they came back down to the States, or as they came back down to the state of Puerto Rico, and what they were experiencing as a community and as a business owners down there. I know they're in the capital area near San Juan. So I'm going to be interested to hear of what happens with that coming up. And then also just the amount of power outages that are still ongoing, even as of mid-November, as of early to mid-November, the power outages and also the water conditions down there are still an issue across much of the region. This is just one story of many stories that we're going to be covering. And I want to make sure that we have every detail of what each person went through, just so you can understand just how really detrimental that it was for this forecast to play out the way that it did, which the National Weather Service did a phenomenal job forecasting all of the hurricanes this year. But still, when you have a hurricane like Maria cross over completely, take a path directly across an entire island like Puerto Rico, you're going to have effects that you've never seen before, especially with the strength of the system. I think the connection's starting to come back in a little bit. Carmen, I think you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can. I'm on my phone. We just had a power outage, and we're in a building that has a generator. So power went out, and the generator just kicked in, and I think we might have internet now. So I'm going to try and see if I can.
Well, go ahead and take your time. You or your husband can work on that. And while you're working, I mean, that just goes to tell you, how long has this been going on for, these power outages?
Oh, well, that's the other issue that's going on now. So the power authority is really working hard trying to get the power connected. And we're obviously getting a lot of help from outside sources. The Army Corps of Engineer has a huge thing going on, and Con Edison, New York just sent a bunch of Con Edison guys down. But and I think a lot of poles, thousands and thousands and thousands of poles were delivered yesterday. So it's a very difficult situation. And so the power authority can get power going, let's say, on the street, but none of the side streets have power. And there's pockets because there's poles down everywhere, and there's a lot of black, dark pockets. And then so when you do have electricity, it's not consistent.
Right.
It'll be on for 3 hours a day or 12 hours a day, or it will go off intermittently during the day. So that is also a struggle for everybody.
So how is that impacting your quality of life as you're trying to rebuild down there and also just trying to get back to normal life? You can't even depend on the power supply.
Oh no, we just don't have a power supply. We do in this the building that we're in right now, we're actually remodeling, and they have internet, and then they have this big generator coming on. In our neighborhood of Ocean Park, this is, I think, the 71st day, 71 days without power.
Wow.
We have, everybody's had to spend a lot of money on generators.
Mm-hmm.
Generators are the thing. They rumble all day long, all night long. Some people have big generators. A lot of people have little small generators. They're all gas or diesel operated. We're in the process of getting a household one for the home, and we have some little ones in our neighbor. And this happens quite a bit. If you have a neighbor who has a generator or who has electricity, everybody will hook up into there. So you'll have 100-foot-long cords, electric cords, going from the generator to your home, and then a million little cords going to the fan and the light and the fridge, if you have enough generator capacity to run a fridge. But still, these generators weren't meant to run, 24/7. They're meant to run 12 hours. They're not meant to run 6 months in a row. They're not designed for that. They're meant to run, 2, 3, 4 days in a row for a normal power outage. So being a generator repairman right now is very lucrative business.
Yeah, it would seem so.
There was a time at Home Depot you couldn't find an extension cord in Home Depot. We had to make a bunch of cords that were long enough so that they would go from the generator. Plus, there's a huge crime wave of people stealing generators.
Wow.
So
yeah.
you have to have your generators tied down all
Mm-hmm.
the time. But there's a street, a very busy commercial street near our home, has a lot of restaurants. We live in a very nice tourist area, and that street has a lot of restaurants on it. So as soon as the restaurants could open up, which was, thank goodness they were able to open up. They got their generators. They got their generators running. You'd walk down the street and there would be one generator after another tied, chained to a lamppost. And a restaurant would be open with a very limited menu. Maybe they could run an air conditioner, maybe they could run fans, but they were feeding people. They were feeding people because nobody had electricity to run a stove. A lot of people here have electric stoves.
Wow.
You couldn't cook. The grocery stores, the lines were a mile long. Going into the gas stations, the lines were a mile long. And I'm saying a literal mile. I'm not making this, this isn't, a few cars. It was just horrendous. And it still is that way in many, many parts of the country. Here in Canada, we are getting up and running. Maybe not so much with power, but the grocery stores are almost back to normal. The gas stations are back to normal, but all of these generators are running all the time, everywhere. Yeah. I don't know if you heard when the guy walked out the door, the noise. I mean, the noise is amazing, and the pollution, the air pollution, is you just look out and you see puffs of black, ugly smoke everywhere because it's the only way to survive. We live in a very hot and humid climate.
Right.
It's mind-blowing hot. And right after the hurricane, it was summer hot. So we have summer hot, which is stifling, where, in the weather business, it's 94 feels like 104, which is your humidity 70%. It's very, very uncomfortable. And when you don't have electricity to run a fan, it is, and the mosquitoes come out. The fan blows the mosquitoes. The fan, it doesn't have the ability to get rid of the mosquitoes. It's torture. It's torture. And that is still going on in a lot of communities in the country. There's communities that don't have running water. When the hurricane first hit, my mom and Hunter were telling me how they had a trickle of water coming out of the shower, which
Wow.
was enough to wash off the sweat. They couldn't wash their hair. They couldn't. The dominoes that fall are hard to imagine. the one thing after the other that goes on. You know, the power authority told us when the power went off that it would be months before we got electricity. But what exactly does that mean? Okay?
Yeah, what does that
mean? It
mean?
means that people who are on oxygen, people who are on dialysis, people who are serious, they're completely isolated, no communication, zero communication. It's incredible. You couldn't drive roads because the trees that were down, the poles. I was trying to explain it to somebody who was in the States. I said, you're driving right now. You're on a road trip. Imagine every tree, every single power line down, and you're completely cut off from the world of communication. That's what it's like in Puerto Rico.
And this has been over 70 days for you.
Oh, we're 1 day without power. We got our power shut off the day before Irma hit.
Okay.
Because everybody was very afraid of Irma.
Right.
They thought Irma was going to be the Maria, and so the power authority shut the power off island wide, and they were never able to bring it up for our neighborhood. Mm. So it's just, you know, it gets dark here at 6 o'clock. So you start your generator just so you can have a light. Everybody walks around with flashlights, headlamps. Everybody makes sure that, you know, they know where all their electric cords are so they don't trip over them at night. It's just a completely different lifestyle. Now, it has brought a lot of communities together because it's so hot out. Everybody goes out on the street, brings out their chairs, sits around and chat. You know, groups try to work together and work together to bring each other up. But like, we were talking to a friend who lives in Puerto Rico. It's a town in the mountains. They haven't had water for over 50 days.
Wow.
And they were saying, look, without electricity, you can get by, right? There's ways to light your house. There's ways to figure out how to get around. But you don't have water.
Water's a necessity, obviously. Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible, and you're dealing with very, you know, you're dealing with isolated mountain communities. The mountains in Puerto Rico are not like the mountains in the States. You know, you don't have valleys and dales. We have mountains that are very steep, very high. The roads are very narrow and winding, and very, very up and down.
Right.
All the houses that you see built on the sides of the roads in the mountains in Puerto Rico, most of those houses are built on stilts, so they can be at the level of the road. It's filled with jungle, massive
I
trees.
can't imagine.
It's just incredible.
Yeah.
You can't imagine. You're told.
Right.
You're told what it might be like, but it's unimaginable.
Then that's why I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to try and gain an understanding about what's happening, and you're doing a great job painting the picture. I mean, I think I can understand what you're trying to say, but obviously I'm not there. Where do you guys go from here? What's the next step for you guys as a couple and as business owners down on the island of Puerto Rico?
Well, you know, it's really hard. The Airbnb business got hit very, very badly. Now, if you have a household generator, we have a lot of, like, the hotels are packed right now. They're filled till December with FEMA, military, first responders, tons of insurance agents, you know, a lot of people coming down, charitable organizations. And now we have all these Con Edison. We've got like 3,000 Con Ed people coming down.
Jeez.
And everybody needs a place to stay. But most of these people do not want to stay in a place that can only offer a fan and a light at night. They need air conditioning. They're not used to this climate. So if you're not set up, then you have a problem. But then if you are set up, you also have a problem because you need to fill those tanks for the generators with gas. And people are spending over $500, $600, $700 a week on gas to run these generators to make people comfortable. It's it's very, very challenging. So I had some people book for November, December. They're coming down for Thanksgiving and some are coming down for Christmas. I told them, I gave them full refunds. I said, there's no way you should come down here right now. I cannot guarantee 24/7 power. And I can't even, the oceans all have swim advisories on them because the rivers have been so overflowing and there's been so much damage and destruction that they put advisories on most of the beaches in Puerto Rico. So I can't tell them to come down and enjoy the beach.
Wow.
I don't even know if El Yunque, the rainforest, is even open. I know they had a huge amount of damage over there. I can't say you can go to the rainforest. I can't say you can go to the Bio Bay. Old San Juan got hit pretty hard.
Right.
There was a street where the mountains were just crashing down one after the other. I mean, this is, a city that's over 500 years old and so beautiful, but it couldn't handle this particular hurricane, even though it handled all of the other hurricanes. So what do you tell people? You say, we really hope that you come back next year. And inside of myself, I say, oh my God, there's going to be another hurricane season next year. Will it be like this? It's something that you have to think about, but you don't really want to think about.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to think about. I mean, me as a meteorologist covering the storm, I don't even want to think about next year either. But you have such a brilliant smile on your face through this entire process, at least through the last 20 minutes with us. What's keeping you smiling? What's keeping you going right now?
Well, you can't stop. You can't sit down. You have your moments of despair.
Mm-hmm.
I will not sugarcoat that. There's definitely moments of despair.
Right.
But you can't, I mean, I'm not going to abandon my property. I'm not going to leave my country right now when I can still stay here,
right.
and I can still help out, or I can still offer shelter eventually for people who are coming down to work. We were very lucky. My house was barely affected. It was just incredible that I remember when Hunter finally got to our house. Like I told you, he stayed at my mom's house, which is about a quarter of a mile away. But when the hurricane hit, the whole area between my house, a little bit east of my house, west of my house, and all the way across the park to where my mother was flooded. The drains were clogged. The pumps did not work at all. And the water rose to 4 feet, 3 and 4 feet in areas. And it was sewer water. It was black. It was really, really ugly. And he had a problem getting out of my mom's house because I told you the driveway gate blew open during the hurricane. Just blew it open, and he couldn't get it shut. So it took him a couple days, and he's a contractor. He knows what he's doing.
Right.
It took him a couple days with a giant crowbar and a hammer to get this huge gate down because we couldn't leave the house vulnerable because looters were everywhere at that time. I know a friend of mine whose house had 4 feet of water in it, and his house was completely looted during that time. So then we were on this track, and I was texting my friends, and they were trying to get to Hunter to rescue him, get him out of there. So I said, okay, you got the gate down, and they couldn't text Hunter, but they could text me in Minnesota. So they were texting me, and I was texting Hunter, and we coordinated it between all of us for him to walk through this disgusting water and get to a dry corner, and they figured out a route to get to him because there were so many down power lines and poles and trees that they couldn't do the regular route. Right. And they figured out how to pick him up, and they got him out of there. So then he had to figure out how to get to our house. So he had to go on a dry street, walk all along the beach, and get up to the street where our house was. And our house was on a dry street, like one of the only dry streets in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And he got to the house, and he was talking to me on the phone we couldn't video or anything like that, but he was talking to me while he opened the door and went in. I mean, it took him a few hours before he could even open the door because the sand was so high, piled up so high. He had to shovel all the sand away from the door, and then he couldn't get the key to work in the lock because the lock was filled with sand. I mean, all these little things that you have no idea are going to happen. I mean, the locks were so filled with sand, he couldn't get them to work. So he finally gets into the house.